Lane, officially welcome to the Wealth Juice podcast. We are so excited to have you on the show, man. I know it's bright and early for you out on the West Coast. I think it's like 6 a.m. I see you have your tea. So we're excited that you're here with us and we appreciate the early journey.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Aloha, guys. We're out here in Hawaii, so it's quite early this morning, but it is what it is. It's Friday. Got to get it done.
I will say I'm a little jealous opening up the window or the door. You probably see a couple palm trees. So, we'll take the early rise here for palm trees and instead of the concrete jungle Corey and I are in Philadelphia. But yeah, man, we're excited to have you. So I want to take a step back here. I know you've been in real estate for a while now. Maybe talk to us pre-real estate, and then when the light bulb went off for you to say, "Hey, listen, real estate seems like it could be a path for me," and talk about how you broke in.
Yeah, so 2007, graduated college with an engineering degree, started to work for the man. Made some good money. Back then, I was able to save maybe 30 grand a year. So it took me a few years to go buy, save up 80 grand for a 20% down payment on a house in Seattle. So that was in 2009. And I was working this gig where I was traveling all over for work as a construction supervisor. We work in like Montana, Nebraska, Texas. So I was only home on like Saturdays. So it was kind of, once I got over how cool it was as a young 20 something year old kid to have a house, like it was kind of lame. I was only there on like Saturday. And I was like, well, let me just rent this thing out. And that was kind of like the start of this whole journey of rental real estate.
Love it, man. So talk to me about you were doing the engineering, you were doing the real estate. Was there a crossover or a point in time where you're like, I gotta lean into the real estate more? Like I love talking to people about transitions in their life and like making decisions to move their business or their hobby or their investing into a different direction. So I'm curious about the crossover and how you were able to do both for a period of time.
Yeah, I mean it was kind of slow in the beginning. I mean, I never thought it was going to be replacing my job. I mean, I had a decent income. So slowly after that, I was like, well, let me this real estate thing is kind of cool, right? Like I'm making I think like 2,200 a month and my mortgage was 1,500. I didn't know anything about like that 50% rule, right? I just was like, oh, there's like 500-600 bucks of beer money every single month. And then I got freaking motivated, right, to do it more. And then combine the fact that I was just living on the road. I didn't have to pay rent anywhere, so I was saving like 80, 100 grand per year for a few years there, and I plowed all that into rental properties. But in the beginning it was slow because I was in high price Seattle, and it took me a couple of years to go buy a duplex. I think that was like 2012 or yeah, 2012, and then prices were coming up and things were just getting more and more expensive. And I just realized like if I wanted cash flow, I would have to go to more flyover states. And that was where I started to pick up a bunch of turnkeys in Birmingham, Atlanta, and Indianapolis. Back then, I mean, you could pick up something from those like turnkey marketers for 80 grand that would rent for, 900 bucks. Today, it's like, I don't know, that ship has sailed, right? Like a lot of those things are like 140 grand that rent for 1,000. Like it's no bueno on those rent to value ratios today.
Yeah, it depends on the market you go to. We're still finding in like, and you mentioned some of these areas, like we're still finding in like an Augusta, Georgia market or a Detroit, Michigan market where you still can get around the 1% rule. But you got to know the right people and you got to be able to build that team out. But I want to talk about starting out investing in such a high price point market. Now you live in maybe the highest price point market in the United States, right? Like Hawaii is like top three, right? Top three or four. But what gave you the idea to be able to go and have the confidence to go invest out of state somewhere that maybe you'd been, but you just don't know much about? I think that's what people struggle with when they're thinking about, well, I'm in New Jersey, tenant landlord laws, they're not great. Price points are so high. Can I go invest somewhere else? And you kind of made that decision and went with it. So how did you decide to pull the trigger?
I think what really pushed me over the edge is like I just happened to talk to a few real landlords or guys doing it, and honestly, like maybe the way how I am, I'm like they weren't the smartest people in the world. I mean, they themselves said it, right? Like I think one guy, he was like a firefighter, and he's like, "Look, man, I'm not the smartest guy in the world. You can do this too." And I was like, "Damn it, I can!" Right? I think I was in my mid 20s at that point, and it was just, it seemed like, yeah, like why can't I do this? And then I think the biggest thing was the numbers worked, right? Like an idiot could make a turnkey rental work back then. Um, the places I were buying were in good markets back then, right? Like again, today it's like 30%, 40% more expensive. The numbers just are blown out of the water today. And mind you, I wasn't really doing any value add, right? I was just buying it turnkey and just getting a property manager in there too. So, for me, it wasn't, with the fact there was no construction, no flip, no none of this burr stuff. It was pretty easy, right, for me to get into.
I want to fast forward to today just to catch people up a little bit, and then we'll dive into some tactic and strategy here. But talk to us about the wealth elevator. I know you have a book. This is your company, and talk about how you kind of transitioned your portfolio from, having a small portfolio of, let's say, 11 properties to now you're investing in larger deals, raising capital, taking down big projects.
Yeah, so that transition happened for me in like 2016. I had 11 of these little rental properties, and I kind of got the hunch that like buying little rental properties just wasn't going to cut it. So what I started to do is I started to go. I think back then there were a lot of these like multifamily investor groups that offered education, and yeah, you got to pay 5 figures plus. So I joined a bunch of them, and because I wasn't married, right? So I didn't really have anything better to do. Didn't have kids, and I had a bunch of money because these 11 rental properties, I started to sell them off to harvest for cash capital to redeploy the equity. um, but here, the magical thing, I mean, I'm sure you guys talk about this a lot, is like your network is your net worth. So I started to interact with other accredited investors, the guys who are not at the local real estate club, right? Like these are the cats that enjoy their privacy and are actually, they've owned these little rental properties. And I was like, started to realize like this cornucopia of strategies like the infinite banking stuff and investing in syndications and private placements, cutting through the middleman, not investing in REITs, but going directly to the source of the deal operator, the GP. And it made a lot of sense to me. I plunked down a lot of money to, essentially learn how to underwrite, which I probably couldn't learn today with AI. But it got me in the door, and I think that was a big thing where it got me around the network, right? Because before that, I was just alone doing this by myself as an introverted engineer, and I didn't realize like going into so many deals was a thing that a lot of people quietly do between $1 to $10 million net worth, and that was kind of that was kind of the inspiration behind my whole community, right? The wealth elevator was to create that physical ecosystem, the experience that people could come and meet other accredited investors and realize they're not weirdos for doing all this financial hacking, alternative financial stuff.
Lane, I think that there is like a shock to people's system when they realize, especially for maybe somebody like an engineer or somebody who's maybe a little bit more low key and behind the scenes at their job, right? And I'm not saying all engineers are like this, but I would venture to say that more than less are more introverted and like
Yeah.
they're
Most
making
of
good
them are.
money.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. And you're making great money, but I think there's a shock to the system of realizing like how much of a people game real estate really is, and like inevitably everyone will run out of their own money eventually when you're buying real estate, and you can do that, and you can buy 10, 15, 20 properties, and you don't need to partner with anybody. No one has to, but you kind of realize this, like play this team game, and the team game allows you to scale. And I was just reading something here. You have thousands of units now at this point. Like the I want to focus on the mindset piece of going from buying turnkey properties, which you're right, was a lot easier in 2014, 15, 16 than it is now, to syndicating units and growing, at a faster rate and owning a smaller portion of these larger projects. Because that's how Ryan and I have grown. We started out buying duplexes and triplexes and single families, and now we're general partners so we own a smaller percentage of a larger project. We figured that was the best way for us to grow. You've taken it to a whole nother level. So talk to us about your thought process of why should I not continue to just try to keep buying these duplexes and these single families? What was that pivot like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I keep looking back to, like, just 11 rental properties in 2016, where my headspace was at. I had maybe an eviction or two on one of those damn things every single year. and maybe one out of three of these evictions resulted in like a $10,000 to $20,000 repair. I think like on my YouTube channel back then, I had like this compilation video of like when I went and visited that. I know there's a lot of POSs in the living room. They just trashed the property, and it was like 20 grand to fix it up. More importantly, it took like 4 months to get the property back online. Was the biggest thing. And I'm like, what am I trying to do again? Make some money here, right? Because something like that happens, and it's like, shoot, even a $10,000 repair is like that's like 3 years worth of cash flow
Yep, on
right
like
down.
$300 a month. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, how does this make sense? And then at that time, I started to realize, like with the syndicated properties, whether it's self storage, mobile home parks, whatever, there's typically like a value add strategy, which I was not really partaking on. I was just doing the buy, hope, and pray strategy, which today you no longer can do that. So to me, it was, I mean, I kind of got lucky getting into it because at the time it just felt like the natural progression, right? Oh, let's go buy 4 units and then 16 and then 52, right? But, the value add addition on top of that, and then the transition to commercial is, I guess, a path that many people have walked down it before.
What was
Yeah.
it like for you to work with, your first partner? I guess because I assume that as you grow this, and as you did, the syndication for people that don't really know, like syndication is just kind of a fancy word for like a larger partnership that you have to go by SEC regulations. So, how did you get people? Were you just showing them your portfolio and saying, "Hey, I'm going to go find these deals and bring in these passive investors and say, okay, like this is what I've done in the past. This is why it worked." Then they started to trust you based on your existing portfolio. Like, how was the partnership? How did that aspect come to be?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. I mean, we did smaller deals to start off with, like little crappy Class C properties where the capital raises weren't too big. But I mean, I was podcasting since 2016, and prior to that, I was building a community of single family home investors, right? And that was kind of where at the earliest days I was teaching people how to buy little rental properties remotely. So I already had kind of built up that track record and community and trust. And for a few years there, I didn't really talk about investing in apartments, right? Like I'm kind of one of these guys where unless I have success, I'm not going to talk about it. I don't want to look like a dummy, right? Like so, but at some point there was a transition. And it's like, people are like, well, Lane, you teach us, you have all these e-courses on buying these little turnkey rentals, etc. What are you doing? That people and them always ask, right? And I'm like, well, I mean, the syndicated stuff is better, right? Because the value add, blah blah blah, like you said, multiple properties under one roof. And so then a lot of people started to say, well, hey, like, you know, we've been following like the progression, from since 2009 to now, and I guess to then, when you find something, I kind of be interested in taking a look at it. So it started very organically like that initially, and yeah, like that was kind of the start of it all.
Yeah, it's cool, man. So yeah, Ryan and I read Raising Capital for Real Estate by Hunter Thompson, and there was a couple other books actually too. I don't know if this is the exact one, but I just remember reading like how to raise capital and how to grow your real estate portfolio quicker by doing larger deals. And they were saying all the things that we were already doing that you just mentioned, which I found it so fascinating. I was reading this book and they're like, you need to create an online presence. You need to start a podcast. You need to start showing people your portfolio and having a virtual resume. And I'm like, I think we're doing this. Like we're kind of perfect for this type of game. So it's funny that you mentioned all of these things that you were doing in the past. Was this by osmosis, Lane? Like, or was this intentional kind of knowing that you were going to transition at one point, or you're just like, hey, I'm sharing my story. I already have this podcast, and by this, the fact that you were just already doing it, then people started to know, like, and trust you. I just find it fascinating that transition.
Yeah, I mean, it was organic, I would say. I mean, what's funny, I mean, a lot of those books talk about a lot of stuff that, to me, frankly, they don't really work, really, because, books, I mean, just like the wholesaling courses, right? As soon as it hits a e-course or home selling course, it's already stuff they did years ago, right? So it's already obsolete. But no, yeah, the first ones were all like friends, family, or like I guess not. I don't really have family that are credit investors, but like that inner circle, or like, hey, if you're going to be doing something as the investor, let me know. I'd like to jump on too, right? Because I think people like to know that I'm kind of going into. But yeah, initially I didn't really get compensated for any of this, right? Like I just was I was an amazing LP that just told his buddies about it, right? And more people.
Yeah. I think all this ties together, which is really cool. I'll just piggyback off what Corey said. I thought the book actually was phenomenal, Hunter's book, and he's like super dialed in, and he gives you really like a roadmap to not only take down deals, but also to showcase what you've done, so that way people know, like, and trust you, and they understand that you know what you're talking about. Obviously, you want to see a deal full cycle to actually then bring other people into it. That Corey and I are the same way. We started with the single family, the duplex, the triplex. Then we scaled up to, we did a 7 unit, a 10 unit, an 18 unit. Then we're LPs on a bigger deal, but we kind of had a lot of hands in the pot on a 43 unit boutique hotel. And so there's a lot of different things that you've had experience in your track record over the years, Lane, right? That parlayed into your relationships, and people see what you're doing. They're like, hey, I want in. But to be able to actually bring people in, you want to know yourself to say, hey, listen, like, I know that I can take down a deal successfully in order to bring other people in. That's exactly how Corey and I are. But then there's a marketing aspect to this whole thing. And I think you did a really good job with the Wealth Elevator Club, is really just like bringing a collective group of people that want to live a bigger life. They want to deploy their capital in a way, outside the stock market, in an alternative way that can potentially not only protect and preserve their capital, but give higher returns over time, right? And so that's, i.e., where these alternative investments come in. I think you've done some mobile home parks, you've done the multifamily. So talk to me a little bit more about the Wealth Elevator Club, and is this purely just a mastermind where you meet a couple times a month and you meet virtually and you talk to your crew, educate, inspire, and then you guys all kind of like crack heads on things, and then when you have a deal, you guys take it down together? Like, how does it really work from top to bottom?
I mean, it's more separated. In fact, I mean, it's made to be separated as church and state in a way. The way I run my organization is it's mainly for accredited investors, and it's meant to be more of an educational thing. In fact, I even kind of slap myself on the wrist sometimes. I'm not really supposed to talk about deal specific, right? You can get in trouble for that, right? Because if you say things about a deal and it doesn't go well, even if it's not your own, right? Like people, that's how people are. But um, like in there, it's like we try and take examples of, like, sometimes in a way that's where like there's like kind of a line. You're looking at like real deals, because how else you can do target practice but shoot large targets out there. And we were saying like, all right, well, look at this pitch deck, right? I mean, and here are the P&Ls, here are the rent rolls. Take a look at, this is the reason why we passed on it, right? And that's kind of where people don't really care unless it's like a real thing. Like it's tough to learn about this stuff academically. I think, oh, this is the reversion cap rate. You increase it along this. If this is this long, like it's boring, and it doesn't really come to life, as opposed to when you're actually looking through a live deal and it's like, oh, hey, they kind of mentioned the reversion cap rate here. Here's the prevailing cap rate. Or maybe this is just my opinion too, right? Like when I was an engineer, I never really did the homework. I just bought the answer book and backwards engineered the answers.
Yeah, it seems like you've done that a lot. I was actually reading your website. I thought one thing was really cool. I want to touch on it here, is like you begin with the end in mind and then you reverse engineer backwards. And maybe that's just the engineer in you anyways, and how you get to the answers. But it's the motivation for creating your site, and it seems like overall the wealth elevator. You said I begin with the obituary in mind, and then you take into consideration how you want to live your life at that point and how you want the obituary read. Can you talk about that a little bit? I was very intrigued by that.
Yeah. Maybe I'm just lazy and I just want to skip to the answer. But I mean, like I think you get into this world of real estate or just entrepreneurship in general, right? And there's this kind of operating system that a lot of people out there are speaking from, and I think it typically comes from the Think and Grow Rich curriculum. I mean, these Tony Robbins, Jim Rome. I mean, Gary Vaynerchuk is, I guess, a newer one these days, but it's still the same stuff. over and over again. But in there is like, one of the 50 to 100 tactics or tips is begin with the end in mind. Figure out where, and it can guide you in many, many ways. Like you said, like the obituary one is like, what kind of person that you want to be when you grow up or when you want to leave this world. It kind of guides what kind of values, like, most people have like 3 to 5 guiding values that, if they really figure out what they are, it kind of leads them to a less confusing life, right? That's why young people are so wishy-washy, because they haven't figured out what their damn values are yet. Where once you get to 40, 50, 60, you kind of know what they are, and you can kind of act within those values. And if which may not appeal to everybody, um, but also, in this whole begin with the end in mind can mean more strategic, more tangible things. Like, I mean, when I had 11 rental properties, it was a pain in the butt. I made a few $1,000s of passive income every month, but was not scalable. And I was like, whoa, I gotta pivot here. I gotta do something else. I mean, you know, even today, right? Like we've done a lot of real estate, but we're kind of pivoting one foot out of real estate nowadays. I had a lot of real estate in the 2021 2024 correction, and I realized that I don't want to be holding on to 90% of my portfolio in real estate. I want to be a little bit more diversified, private equity, venture capital, things like that, right? Like that's, to me, is a more of a diversified portfolio, and I just want to live life from an investor point of view is a little bit less fragile or exposure into one market, you know. And so that's, but you learn, that's, I think that's the unfortunate thing. You learn by pain.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, you touched on one thing really, really kind of eloquently in a way. You're talking about people as they approach an older age, and there's like two thoughts on this. One is you're getting more seasons in life, but then you're also getting more seasons as a business owner, right? Like just because you're 40 years old, you could have zero experience in business and you're not trained in certain ways. But I read a quote the other day and I thought it was awesome. Like it said, life begins at 40, the rest is just research. And I think it's really interesting because you're learning about yourself, learning about what you want to do. You're learning the value of yourself, trying to figure out your morals, your ethics, your values, and like who you are, and really like understand your purpose. And I don't know that everyone figures out their purpose, right? But it seems kind of clear to me that all of us in this room, our goal is to show people that there's a different way. And everything you learned in books and in school isn't always, you don't have to always go the traditional path. And more often than not, the top 1% are people that are living the big lives and have the freedoms that you sought after or you want to attain. They did things differently. They took massive risks and they didn't play by the, hey, go to work 9 to 5 for 40 years, slowly get the salary increases every year. They took a bet on themselves. And so that's what's important to talk about, I think, in this episode, is just to showcase, hey, listen, like you started out as an engineer, then you had the single family portfolio, then you scaled up to the larger multifamily, and then you started bringing people into deals as well to scale even larger. But now you're also pivoting a little bit outside of real estate into some of the other things. And we are actually doing the same thing. And it's interesting because you think you're always going to go down the same path. You're like, when you're fixed on it in 1 year, you're like, all right, man, this is the way. And we're going to do it over and over and over. But my point is, you do have to pivot a long time. And I think some of the most successful entrepreneurs that we've met pivot very strategically because there's a lot of shiny object out there and they don't do enough research and they have the capital. So they go try something, doesn't work. And they're like, okay, back to real estate or back to this. And so my point is if you can learn to say no more often than you say yes, you're kind of protecting this nest egg that you've built over time. And Corey, I know you wanted to say something here before.
Yeah, well, I wanted to. It's very interesting because the difference between shiny object syndrome and pivoting is a very blurred line, and that's where I consistently struggle. I mean, Ryan and I have done alternative investments, but we are like 90% or 80% of our investments are in real estate, and then we have stock market and Bitcoin and all that stuff too. But I want to talk to you, Lane, about the transition out of real estate, or not out of, but like some of your holdings in private equity, and like why you felt like that was the right move for you at that time, and then maybe talk to us about the specifics of these investments. Because to me, it seems like a higher level play, and maybe you have to have some experience to go buy the real estate first, or do you think people can jump right into them? So just talk to me about the pivotal moment there, and like what maybe some specifics about these alternative investments that you're working in.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. So I would say a good book recommendation is, I think Angela Duckworth, Quit, or I don't know. Just Google Quit. or Amazon. But essentially, the premise is like when you entered an investment, there were certain types of fundamentals that you were buying off of, right? Like you buy crypto because you either like the fact that it's been going up, which is probably not a good idea, or you like the whole like decentralization, that trend, right? That technology trend, or you just thought the technology was cool. Um, and when you go into something, you should write it down. You should figure out why you're buying it, because when the thing 10x's, like how it kind of is today, is those things still present, right? Like you need to reevaluate. The idea is like just like a stock. If you chose to hold on to it or not sell, you've chosen to buy it today. Just like my 11 single families in 2016. By me holding on to it, that's me choosing to buy it today, which I wouldn't. If the price is a little bit higher, the fundamentals had kind of changed at that point. Um, in a way, it's, maybe I dare go here, but it's like romantic relationships, right? Like, yeah, you said yes at one point, but is it still true today? Maybe not. But that's kind of my thoughts around like pivoting. I mean, and then you start to realize, I'm in a lot of these entrepreneurial groups where you have to have verified revenue to get into. So that's, I think, a key thing, where you can't get in unless you have like $1 million of revenue. But you start to see these more successful mid journey type of entrepreneurs and business owners. You start to realize like that where they started was really never where they are mid journey today, and probably where they're not going to be in the future. So there's always like a pivot coming. And with me being a somewhat of a mid journey early entrepreneur founder, um I got myself too, right? Like I think all of us can say we are real estate junkies. We are real estate fanboys for sure, right? Sure as hell worked for me from 2009 on. But what in the fundamentals change? And like, look, I'll still have maybe half of my stuff in real estate because we operate it and I'm familiar with it and know how to underwrite it. But real estate lost a big tailwind with the interest rates, right? Like the interest rates is basically free money. There's a big correlation between prices and interest rates. And if you look at the Chatham Financial Curve or the CME FedWatch tool, one of those should be bookmarked on every listener's bookmarks. They're saying that the interest rates aren't going to be coming down anytime soon, maybe in the next decade. So things have changed for sure. You could probably go and also look at the words by Howard Marks, how we kind of entered a different stage in the market cycle, especially for real estate. So those are a lot of things that, yeah, for a while there in 2022, I think 2022 was when interest rates went up. Definitely everybody was shell shocked back then for at least 6 months. And then you start to realize, oh, this stuff ain't coming down. What has changed in the fundamentals? Does it still make sense? And so that was kind of the point where, yeah, even I will self admit that there was a while there that I was still holding on. I was like that raccoon holding onto that shiny object, and I was stuck in the trap.
Yeah.
So let's talk about it now. You painted a great picture of kind of the market cycles and how things are changing, but you didn't really dive into the alternative investments. And I want to talk about those in depth a little bit more, just to give people a peek behind the curtain where they might not even know what's available. An obvious one to talk about is Bitcoin, which we can. It's more of a strategy. I wouldn't call it an alternative investment, but that's infinite banking, and we can get there. But talk to us about some of the other ways. You mentioned 50% of your wealth is in real estate. What about the rest of the bucket? I'm curious where you're deploying cash now.
Yeah, I mean, so real estate. Go back to what we were saying earlier. Real estate, I think, is a great place for people to start, right? Like I'm kind of speaking to the listener out there. You even gotten started with any of this stuff, I would still say real estate is the place to go because an idiot can run real estate, right? Like that's kind of the joke that we all real estate investors say. I mean, it's one of the oldest businesses out there. You rent a box out to people. It's widely used. It will probably be in high demand. I mean, with demographics, especially like workforce housing. That's kind of where I like to stay too. But I think if you're trying to, you know, do anything, you start on easy mode, right? You start on level one, that's real estate in terms of operation, and then you kind of step up from there. And that's kind of, I don't want to Yeah, you invest off fundamentals, but if you're an operator type, you need to also be going off like, what the heck can I drive here? I'm not going to just hop into the Ferrari, right? I'm going to spin out. Or there's those Death Dodge Vipers that are apparently the most dangerous car in the world. I'm going to start with something a little bit more easier to handle. So with that said, you start to realize that there are a lot more exotic investments out there in terms of higher risk, higher return, such as operating businesses. And then going back from a numbers point of view, when we underwrite deals with real estate, your net operating income is made up your income minus expenses, right? Like you can kind of take a look at your income and it kind of trades within a band, and your expenses, you only have so much you can do to change that. This is again why real estate operation is pretty damn easy, in comparison to an operating business, which has so many moving parts, right? Like the income, the income on apartment building is vast majority is the rents. Imagine that, right? And that ain't gonna change. Oh, I'm never saying never, but it's probably not going to change for a long time. Sure, you have some other income opportunities come in, like trash valet and nicer properties, like
Storage
fees
or like
here,
stuff like
there,
that. Yeah.
yeah. But on a business, a real life business, that the line of income, just talking about one half of the equation here, could just wholesale change in 6 months, for all we know. And that is, and then that's not, we're not even talk about expenses, how many levers you could pull there, or things that could explode on you, tariffs, right? So it's playing the game on a higher level, but the higher risk is there, right? At the end of the day, investors need to look at things from a risk reward perspective. The more risk you take on, you better see outside rewards potentially. And you go to the other side of the spectrum, like, we've done some angel investments where potentially the returns could be 20x, 50x, 500x for some, right? Like it's just phenomenal, but you're going to lose your money most of the time, right? And those are what we call asymmetric plays. There's a spectrum in the middle, right? Like you get into private equity, the way I define that is you have an existing company that is producing revenue and ideally profit at that point, where an angel company or angel investment or a VC deal, there's typically very little to no revenue. It's just a pipe dream at that point, and you're betting on the potential in the future, right? Like you're betting on the NBA player that has never touched the floor in the NBA court, or still riding the bench, and because he doesn't even know how to substitute himself in, but they may be 7 feet 5. That's kind of what you're betting on. But there's a spectrum here.
Yeah. So just to kind of give a broad spectrum, I'll give the journey here and how I see it. Typically if you're a 9 to 5 employee, right, and you start investing, you're like the first thing that jumps out at you is the 401k, right? Typically your employer offers an employee match. You start there. You're like, okay, I have some money in the stock market. From there, if you max it out, typically you can go the Roth IRA mark, where it's like your self investment, but then outside of that, it's a brokerage account. And after that, people start dabbling a little bit into crypto, a small portion of their portfolio, and then potentially larger. Then after that, logically, it's okay. Now real estate keeps coming up in the picture, and so people typically start with investment property, and they start with single family. Then sometimes they go the duplex, the small multis, then the larger multis, and then after real estate, you naturally still look for something else, and that's where some of these alternative investments come up. We mentioned Bitcoin, but that's even way back on the journey. But also, I'm thinking some of these VC type deals, pre-IPO opportunities. I'm in an investor group, and a lot of these things, they sound sexy, right? And you're getting in, like you said, you're betting on the NBA player before they hit the floor. 60% of the time it works out, 40% it doesn't, and then you're like, okay, I'm out of this cash. And most often, or like I think you actually have to be so. AngelList.com is one of them where you can start finding some of these investments, and you have to be an accredited investor, which is $1 million in net worth, excluding your primary residence, or you have to make over 200 grand a year for the last like 2 years with the same trajectory to do it this year. I think 300 as a married couple. So there's a lot of stipulations to prove that you're an investor, that you know the risks, that you understand that you could lose it all, right? But it is very interesting, as you mentioned, like as you get older in this game and you've been playing for a while, all of these newer type investments pop up. You're like, I have a little side cash. Like I'll put the minimum of $7,500 in, or I'll put $5,000 in here, for the opportunity to potentially 20x. but knowing that you could lose it all. So I think bringing it back to what you said, real estate is the foundation where it shows you how to bet on yourself, take a bet on running a small business, but then also underwriting deals, getting a return for profit. So there's a lot of things to learn in the game here. And once you play in real estate for a while, I think it seasons you and trains you to be able to take the risk into the next field, if you will. And so that's naturally what's happened from us. Like, quite honestly, I haven't taken the plunge on those pre-IPO opportunities because, like, I know the tried and true real estate, what we're doing now, has been really working for us, and I want to stick in our wheelhouse. But it is the next logical thing where I'm like, this is interesting, man. I might want to take a shot. So
You elegantly put it really well, like that journey. I'll say like one thing I've been noticing with a lot of my investors, and this happened to me too, like more of the internal dialogue on what's going on in investors' head throughout the years as they're going through this journey, is initially they come to this world in search of cash flow. Why? A few reasons. The first reason is they're trying to replace their day job, like you said, right? Like they're a W-2 employee. They're trying to get rid of that, right? And they think by replacing their income, they can rid themselves of their day job. And I myself thought this too, right? That's why I was trying to pick up all these little rental properties and trying to piece together $300 a month every single time to get to my salary to go FI and quit my job. Um, there's a mistake to this as I start to realize and started to become more of an accredited investor, started to see what higher net worth investors do. My book, I call this like the third floor of the wealth elevator and beyond. Like, what do the wealthy people do? In a way, they kind of get away from this search of cash flow and into they understand the concept of they need to have the money go out as an investment. Imagine that, right? Like that, the wait, have to have patience because their money is doing bigger things as opposed to just catching a dividend every single month. But the second reason why people do this, I think, is they are new at this world, right? They haven't had a rental property before. They haven't seen this work, so there is distrust in this whole new thing. So that how do they make this right in their head? Is they want that they want that constant reverb rate coming back, that they get money in their bank account every quarter or every single month, right? It's like their mom doesn't love them and they always want to hug their mom and hug them on for that constant recertification or whatnot. The third reason is typically if their spouse is skeptic, right? Like nothing's worse than putting 100 grand in a development that takes 2 or 3 years to make great returns, but you don't have anything and you have to answer your skeptic spouse who's a little annoying. What will happen with that money, right? Like, well, it's in there. It's they're putting up the framing, they're building it right now. We got to be patient and wait. We can't just you can't have cash flow and big equity pop appreciation, right? And sophisticated investors understand this. Newer investors, for it is what it is. Like I myself was like this too, right? I went for cash flow, the quicker hit early, and I think that's a bit of a mistake.
Yeah, I think this is very interesting because what ends up happening with most people's real estate journey is that you're right. They dive into the cash flow, and then this whole like tax benefit situation, especially for like W-2 employees, is ignored, and how much that can help you in the tax world. And I also think that you're right. There's a forgotten world of patience, and even more so. And I'm hearing this from very young investors. Some people that I talk to, they're 20, 22, 26, 27. That are like, I don't want to get into real estate. It takes too long. And I think that mindset is a little, first of all, I understand it because we live in an instant gratification Amazon world, but I think it's a little bit broken because anything that you do, that you invest in, is going to take the time and the energy and effort to hold on to actually see the reward. I don't care what investment it is. It doesn't matter. Like, you can get lucky on an altcoin. Sure, I'm sure that's possible, but you will not be able to replicate that process over and over and over again to actually build wealth. So I think that was perfectly put, Lane. Like the idea is like, you can have equity and cash flow both, but you can't have them both at the same time, right? And you're right. We've put money into deals in 2020, 2021 that are churning, that are not spitting off as much cash flow as we thought, but they're just building that slow equity each year, and we're waiting for refis, and rates went up, so we have to wait longer. And it's like this whole thing of just being patient and sticking it out. And I think that's the ultimate mind of an investor, is like, how do you actually do that. So, Ryan, did I cut you off? I know you might have had something, and I want to get into Lane's like future goals, but go ahead.
No, I just think it's interesting. We talk about the balance of cash flow and equity all the time, Core. And I think both of you guys hit on this. And this is kind of a shout out to the people that are getting in the game right now, where you think you're going to be able to escape your job and retire early because that's the way it's pitched in books that were written 10, 15 years ago, where you just can stack rental properties over and over. And we've lived that. And we found you're saving up cash, draining your bank account, buying a property, repeating the cycle over and over. And then you get a partner, you try to split the equity, or excuse me, the down payment 50-50, and then you bring in other people. It still takes a long time. And what we found is, I think, switching our mindset to say, hey, the benefit in real estate is actually the loan pay down and the appreciation. That's the real benefit. Cash flow is just the cherry on top. And if you get it to pay a couple bills, really what it's doing is building up your base. And when I say building up your base, a base of reserves. If you want to go buy the next rental property, or you have a roof that caves in, or whatever it may be, if you have a big HVAC hit on the property, something like that, big CapEx expense, then that's what covers it, right? Where we thought we were going to be living off that cash flow. And what we found is we've had to build up our portfolio for big exits. And that's what really has paid us. We've had, some bigger deals come through. You get the $70,000 check, you get the $100,000 check. You're like, whoa, I just made a year's worth of salary in one deal. And if we can stack one of those a year to continue to refi or sell, that's where you really make big money. And so it's really hard for people when they get into the game to not really understand and big shiny lights, like, I'm going to become a real estate investor. And it's important to start, but it's the realistic expectation should be, hey, you're going to be in this game for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. It's a long-term hold. That's why we talk about real estate as it's very forgiving, but it's not that instant, fantasy crypto money where you're going to make 100% return every single year by just dumping your money into it. It's not, but it's tried and true, and it's the foundation. And that's why Corey and I have built this as our base level foundation. And really, if you think about that timeline that I mentioned, 10 minutes ago, that's something you should keep in your mind. And that's the evolution. I think there's another thing we didn't really talk about, where we won't get into it here, but I know you touched on it, Lane, is then you can start buying small businesses. We know a bunch of people that go in and they buy a business that's already cash flowing, but has nothing to do with real estate. That's not really our lane, but there's a lot of different ways to make money. And I think that someone that's trying to replace their W-2 income as fast as possible, that could be an option. I've never done it, but I've heard a lot of people have success with it. You still have to go buy the business and operate the business. It's not like you're going in passive. So you can't escape the work, but I will say, for those that love their career, making a high clip of income, and they just want the tax benefits, and also to find an investment that's going to work while they sleep, essentially, not have to worry about tenants, not have to worry about any of the headache. That's where they become LPs, right? And we see a lot of doctors, lawyers, dentists, etc. They're like, listen, I understand investing. I have my money in the stock market. I want to get into real estate. I don't want to touch it. I want you, the trusted operator that has successfully exited deals, to handle it. And I'll jump in as a passive partner. And that's where I think that's some of our deals that we're doing right now. Lane, that's some of the deals that you've been doing. And I think that's a really healthy way for people that want to get into the game, but they don't want their hands on, to start their investment journey. And then you can get into the larger fields where it's the private equity stuff, but really understanding full cycle of the deal, how to underwrite, how to really see the operations of the side. So, but little education there. That was just my thoughts. Cora, if you want to talk about, future goals and things like that, take it away.
Yeah, Lane, I just want to hear, as we wind down the show, where are you going with everything? Where are you going with the Wealth Elevator? I know you have a book. Just talk to me about the next 2, 3, 4 years in your business and where you want it to get to.
Yeah, I mean, it's just finding another deal, right? I think that's the biggest thing. And piggybacking on what you guys last said, I mean, unless you're Shohei Ohtani, you can't hit 50 home runs and score 50 bases and strike out 10 guys in a game. So how does that relate to investing? Well, you can't really find a deal that gets 8% cash flow paid quarterly and double your money. You used to, back in the heyday of 2015 to 2016, that was the golden era of apartments, but it just doesn't happen today. And but you still see on pitch decks, we see all those garbage deals all the time. You just got to play around with the reversion cap, and no, you're not going to increase the rents by $300, even though you see some comps that may say it is. It's not going to happen. But that's it's just not going to happen. You can't get both these days. So as an investor, if you're looking for both, you're just not going to find it, right? It's the scope, schedule, budget triangle. You can't have it cheap, fast, and high quality. It's just
Yeah.
not possible.
I think
So,
go ahead. Now you go.
so yeah, like for us, it's just like we just are. What I'm trying to do these days is just find the best deals out there, underwrite it with our assumptions, and just pick the best one. I tell all our guys all the time, like, look, we can never guarantee anything. I don't know if these are like the best deals out there, but out of our network and our ecosystem, yes, these are the best ones at this time. And that's the idea as an investor. Like, I've been hurt in this last recession for commercial real estate. To me, the only thing you can do, I mean, the market's going to come down like how it has 20-30%. People are going to get hurt. That evaporates all the LP stack in some cases. The only way you can protect yourself is have a diversified portfolio over time of 4 to 7 years, right? Like, I have stuff that got bombed out, but I have a long portfolio where the other stuff is totally okay. And that will happen. I mean, it probably won't happen now just because it just happened, but every 7 to 8 years, there's a market correction, and so it will happen again.
Yeah, I think that's what I wanted to make sure you touched on is like this thing does go in cycles and it's not always the down cycle. Like we're living one now, but if you underwrite conservatively, the number one thing that I want to touch on here is it's like you mentioned a trifecta, but I also think this is a trifecta is your network, your ecosystem, and your team. That is where you are going to make the most ROI. It's finding the deals that are off market. We've gotten a bunch of these in the last 12 months, whether it's a referral from our lender, a referral from our property manager, or a referral from someone living in the property that found out the owner was going to sell, right? And before it hits the market, everybody gets their eyes on it, and then you negotiate a deal with the owner because you have a relationship. That's how you get it. You get it undervalued, right? And then you build a business plan out. And sometimes you mentioned this, like Shohei. This is you're not going to get someone that can hit and pitch, right? You're going to get the tried and true, the singles, the doubles, the triples. If you get a home run deal, it's amazing, right? But just understand that this game is a 5 to 7 year hold. You said 4, so that we'll take that too. But we talk to all of our investors and friends that come into deals with us, and really just us setting expectations. Like it's a 4 to 7 year play. We have the market is going to dictate some things, and we're going to do the best we can to squeeze as much rent as we possibly can and get the right tenants in there and fix this place up to the standard that we believe can get max rent, right? But understand the market conditions change and that changes everything. So as long as my point here is as long as you understand risk, as long as you understand the system of real estate and what the goal and the business plan is, and you understand that this is the lane and the direction, you trust that's the lane and direction that you want to go, you'll be in a good spot. And so I think it's cool. I think that it's a good way to kind of wrap the episode here. I just want to kind of talk about, you mentioned the business stuff and the goals, and you said the next deal, right? But like this whole thing, right? It's to build a better life and a healthier life and a more happy, fulfilling, purposeful life, right? So for you, what does real estate do for you in that aspect? Like, what are you looking to do in the next 3 to 5 years on the personal side that, maybe it's not talked about in every podcast episode?
I use a line from Jimmy Butler during the playoffs. What am I going to do later on today? I'm going to go Halloween with my 4-year-old and just look for more deals on a month-to-month basis. So I guess I call that one day at a time.
Yeah, I love it, man. Some people will give the grandiose, massive, like I'm gonna go buy the Bentley. I'm gonna go take 17 vacations. But I gotta say, when you really ground yourself and understand that most of this is just to have the time freedom to do what you want when you want, you'll find when you have the time after you do the joyride in the Bentley or whatever you dream about, half the battle is just wanting to go home and spend time with your friends and your family and just have a good time, not feel that financial pinch. So I will also be doing the same. It is Halloween when we're recording this, so I've got to go take Cinderella out to get some candy later this afternoon. I'm really excited about it too. So overall, dude, thank you. I think this was a fun episode. We appreciate you coming on the show, and we look forward to staying in touch.
Let's see what time we got. Well, my Cinderella is gonna wake up in